They said their names were Clara and Karen, twin sisters forged in the fiery crucible of survival, enduring the agony of bondage under the relentless sun of Bogard Plantation. The moment they became nothing more than currency in the eyes of their master was the moment their lives changed forever. Together they stood on the auction block, framed by the glaring sun and a sea of hungry eyes, a living testament to the grotesque reality of their existence. As the auctioneer's booming voice called out, the crowd came alive, a cacophony of desperation and greed. Each shout was a potent reminder that for some, beauty was a commodifiable asset, not a gift. Clara felt her heart thudding against her chest as men leered at them, evaluating their worth. Her fingers trembled at her side, while she and her sister exchanged a look, a silent affirmation of their unity amidst the chaos. Sharing the same copper-brown skin, high cheekbones, and deep-set eyes, they were indeed a matched pair, the embodiment of temptation and the prize for any covetous owner. Two fine specimens.
Twin girls at prime breeding age!
The auctioneer's voice cracked like a whip, stinging their ears. Clara's throat tightened, and her heart thundered with fear, but she forced her eyes to the ground, counting the weathered wooden planks beneath her feet. Each numbered step beneath her was a small reprieve from the predatory gazes that dissected her and her sister like pieces of livestock. 500. 600! The numbers rose in rapid succession, a wild dance of currency amid the muted desperation of slaves praying for a kind hand. 800 for the pair! Clara risked a hurried glance up, heart sinking as she caught sight of him. Silas Bogard, a man whose cold gaze held the calculated weight of ownership. He stood apart from the crowd, a calculating wolf surveying his prey, dissecting their value with cruel precision. The gavel came down like a death knell. Sold to Master Silas Bogard. As the other bidders retreated, their satisfied grins echoed like a haunting refrain. Clara yearned to scream, to fight back against the injustice enveloping them, but she held her tongue, silencing her rage with the belief that surviving was paramount, at least for now. With rough hands pushing them from the block into the waiting wagon, Clara and Karen found themselves among other frightened souls, the chill of despair numbing the air around them. Amid the whispers of fear and uncertainty, a small voice broke through. "Where are they taking us?" a child asked, her wide eyes glistening with tears. "It's all right," Clara said, desperate to comfort. "We'll take care of you." The girl sniffled, clutching her knees. "My name's Letty. I'm Clara, and this is my sister Karen." Karen leaned closer, her resolve firm despite the uncertainty. "We won't be here long, Letty. We're going to run when we get the chance." "Don't say that," Clara hissed, her protective instinct rising. "We must stay quiet." But Karen, ever the firebrand, simply said, "What's the point of being silent when they're planning to use us like breeding stock?" The wagon meandered on, dragging them deeper into the unknown, the cries of infants echoing in Clara's mind as they approached the estate. Each agonizing mile felt like a surrender, inching away from the fragments of their former lives. They arrived at Bogard Estate, disembarking into a world that reeked of despair draped in magnolia petals. The sight of the grand white house rose before them, hovering in the morning mist, but it was not the mansion that twisted Clara's stomach into knots. It was the unmistakable wail of the infants, the sound of new life, ringing hauntingly from somewhere beyond. As they were herded into a long building marked Infirmary, the horrific reality of their fate began to unfurl before them, like the petals of a sinister flower. "Welcome to the breeding program," Mistress Ruth, the overseer of female health, announced cheerily, as if welcoming guests instead of unwilling captives. "Your beauty and potential will contribute to the estate's legacy." Clara felt bile rise in her throat. "We won't do it," she whispered to Karen, but her sister clenched her jaw, anger flickering in her eyes. Ruth merely smiled. "You'll be paired with our studs to ensure quality offspring." As days turned into weeks, the twins clung to each other, facing the brutality of their new reality while survival instincts kicked in. Clara measured every passing moment, every breath, every memory of freedom, pooling them within her heart as she learned to navigate the complex web of submission and deception that ruled the plantation. They were taught to cook, clean, and labor tirelessly from dawn till dusk. But even in the depths of their ordeal, they devised a silent rebellion. In stolen moments, they whispered of escape, of a network of hope beyond the darkness of oppression. At night, when the air turned oppressive with humidity, They would reminisce about their childhood dreams, the expansive fields beyond the misty horizon, the scent of freedom hanging like fruit on lush trees, and their unyielding bond as sisters that could not be broken. But Clara never forgot the nightmare creeping closer with every elapsed day. The thought of being paired, of becoming mere vessels for the Bogard legacy, enveloped her in dread. Each time Clara glanced at Karen, she saw not just her sister, but the fierce protector, the wild spirit willing to challenge status quos. "Tonight is the night," Karen whispered fiercely one fateful evening as they stood under an ancient oak, far from the prying eyes of overseers. "When the moon rises high, I'll take back control over my body, our bodies. We must fight against this." "I can't risk it," Clara whispered, fearful of the consequences not just for them, but for Letty and others. Karen met her gaze, eyes alight with a pale flame of vengeance. "We don't have the luxury of hope. We have to take action, together." Silent prayers faded as Clara and Karen formulated their plans. They began to gather strength, a willing acceptance of strategizing against the forces that bound them in chains. Their resolve solidified each passing day, until at dawn, with hearts beating as one, they prepared to take back the pieces of their lives, fueled by a united strength that only twins born together could understand. They said their names were Clara and Karen, bound no longer by silence, but by the promise etched in their hearts to reclaim their freedom. They would emerge against the odds. The plan, both audacious and terrifying, revolved around survival, preserving the bond of their sisterhood against the backdrop of the breeding farm that sought to tear them apart, soul by soul. The fire of their rebellion would not simmer quietly, it would blaze. Welcome to hell, the Bogard breeding farm, a place where hope withered beneath the weight of despair and dreams turned into nightmares. The air hung heavy with the stench of sweat and fear, where bodies were mere vessels for a cruel and twisted purpose. The land stretched endlessly, a patchwork of sun-soaked fields and crumbling shanties, each corner hiding whispers of broken women and their stolen children. From dawn till dusk, the relentless toil shaped the lives of the enslaved, yet it was not the labor that tore at their spirits. It was the unyielding knowledge of their fate. Clara and Karen stepped into this living hell, their fragile bond of sisterhood strained under the glare of an unforgiving world. They had become an integral part of the Bogard estate, not merely as workers, but as prime specimens destined for a breeding program, a term that dripped with perverse implications. The twins were now part of an unholy cycle of reproduction, their worth quantified by the fragile lives that could emerge from their wombs. Master Bogard reveled in his possession of them, observing their identical features with a mix of lust and greed, as if he were a farmer admiring prized livestock. With each passing day at the farm, the twins learned quickly that they were not just slaves, they were cattle, part of a breeding stock designed to produce profitable offspring. Clara found ways to navigate the horror silently, while Karen burned with a rage that could only lead to destruction. Once inseparable in their dreams of a better life, they now faced a reality that threatened to tear them apart. In whispered conversations at night, they spoke of the bleakness that surrounded them, embedding their words with defiance. They would not surrender to the cruelty that sought to define them. The breeding program was cloaked in the guise of benevolence, rhetoric spewed from the mouths of the masters and overseers who claimed to provide for the enslaved. Each month, as the moon rose high in the sky, the women gathered in a crude assembly, their hearts entwined with trepidation as they awaited the announcements of pairings. The overseer, with his cruel smile, delivered the names of those chosen for breeding, marking destinies with a flick of his wrist, as if drawing lottery tickets for a death sentence. Clara felt inner turmoil festering within her. She couldn't let any man touch her as they enforced their will upon her. Then there was the chilling reality of the nursery, a place of cries that echoed through the nights. Clara had overheard the women lamenting the loss of their babies, each one sold off before knowing the warmth of a mother's embrace. The nursery was filled with mothers who had weaned their children, only to witness heartbreak as they were forcibly separated from their offspring. The twins vowed silently that they would never allow their flesh to be used as a factory for the empire of oppression orchestrated by Master Bogard. Each day stretched agonizingly, weaving a tapestry of despair. Clara scrubbed the floors of the main house while sweltering heat beat down on her. She noticed that the overseer's eyes hungered for something more, drawing her gaze with a familiarity that spoke of predation. Meanwhile, Karen stood firm, always aware of their surroundings, her spirit too fierce to be broken entirely. They carried with them an unspoken promise. No matter what happened, they would remain sisters, bonded by blood and circumstance. Inside, the place reeked of sorrow, and around them, the stricken souls carried the burden of their suffering like second skin. Women with vacant gazes toiled under the rough hands of nature. Pregnant sisters bent over gardens, enduring pain as they worked the land that would never yield them freedom. Laughter felt misplaced among them, a cruel taunt of the days when they danced freely on the hillsides before misery had tied them down. Clara found solace in her sister's presence, but even that light dimmed in the shadows of despair. Every evening, whispers of rebellion brewed among the women. They spoke of the stories their mothers had shared, a lineage of strength tinged with heroism that somehow survived against all odds. It was in the night air that Clara and Karen would sit together, plotting their escape with quiet urgency. They coveted freedom like a shimmering light at the end of a long, dark tunnel, aching to break the chains forged around their spirits. And so, a plan began to take form, darting in and out of their conversations, shimmering just beyond their reach, like mirages in the heat. Some nights, Clara's heart raced as she listened to the sounds of other women's horror stories, those who had fought back and succumbed to the inevitable weight of punishment. They recounted tales of resistance, but those whose spirits had been broken remained silent, defeated by the cruel reality of their existence. Clara's thoughts often strayed to freedom. They weren't destined to end as property. Then came the day when tragedy struck. A pregnant woman, broken by the overlords, unleashed her anguish and was met with a relentless punishment. The twins felt the tremor of grief ripple through the ranks, a reminder that life was not valued here, merely exploited. With each brutal display of power by the masters, the weight of despair settled heavily, but it also sparked something fierce within the sisters. This was no longer merely a matter of survival. They needed to ignite the fire of rebellion that lay dormant inside them. In hushed tones, Clara and Karen vowed together they would not bear children for Bogard's twisted legacy. They would escape this nightmare or die trying, a mantra binding them tighter than any chains. The rapacity of the breeding farm fueled an anger that would not easily be extinguished. When night cloaked the plantation in darkness and chaos swirled around the fire pit where the workers gathered, Clara realized in quiet resolve what their ultimate goal would be. The breeding farm would not continue, not on their watch. They would gather whispers of hope into a wind of change, bursting forth with the power to challenge the horrors they faced. Through all the frightful nights of horror and pain, one truth rang clear. Though the Bogard breeding farm sought to eradicate their very essence, Clara and Karen would fight for their legacy, for their existence, forging strength out of fear, and together they would reclaim the freedom that had been violently snatched away. In a place where silence was the only refuge, Clara and Karen forged a plan cloaked in whispers and shadows. Each night after the day's horror faded into the darkness, they gathered the courage that daylight had drained from their souls. Their existence at Bogard Breeding Farm had twisted hope into something unrecognizable. Yet in that twisted landscape, determination bloomed like a wildflower in an unforgiving field. The women of the dormitory, weary but resilient, unwittingly became a part of their silent rebellion. Clara watched as Karen spent hours talking with Amara, the older woman who had been a mother to many but lost her children to the unyielding machinery of oppression. Amara shared stories of her past, of escapes tried and failed, of brothers and sisters who had vanished in the night, leaving only echoes behind. Each tale fed the fire in Clara's heart. The twins had often taken solace in one another's presence, their bond sharpening in the face of adversity. One night, while the moon hung low, bathing the dormitory in silver light, Karen crouched close to Clara, her eyes gleaming with a conspiratorial spark. "We need to dig," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rustling leaves outside. "The men are too busy watching us to notice what is beneath their feet." Clara's breath caught. The idea sent a shiver of excitement coursing through her. "A tunnel?" she breathed, eyes widening. Karen nodded, her usual fierce defiance igniting with a spark of vision. It would be their lifeline, a pathway carved into the earth. a way to escape the prison they had been forced into, a means to reclaim their bodies and their lives from the men who sought to own them. The prospect of digging at night became a ritual of sorts. As the clock struck midnight and the rhythms of Bogard Farm faded into a reluctant silence, the twins stole away to the old smokehouse, abandoned, neglected, but holding the promise of freedom within its rotting timbers and dirt-strewn floor. The smooth clay below had shifted over the years, and Clara could almost sense the weight of history beneath her fingers. With each deliberate scrape of a nail against the earth, each clandestine movement of their hands, it felt as though they were unraveling the very fabric of oppression that had bound them for far too long. Amara led them, guiding their hands where to dig, encouraging them with hushed whispers to stay low and be vigilant. Each handful of dirt unearthed a delicate sense of hope among the women. While madness sprawled across the plantation in broad daylight, they unspooled a different narrative when night called. "Focus on the sound of freedom," Karen urged, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow as she transformed debris into potential byproducts. What had once been a barrel of forgotten goods became a tool for their escape, and memories of anguish were buried in the deepest scars they left on the land. But whispers often emerged from hiding places, and shadows didn't linger forever in solitude. The overseers were vigilant, and news ran rampant through the streets about the rebellious twins. Clara felt the tension mounting, a dark undertone, but it only fueled her resolve. She and Karen devised signals, a notch carved into the wood beneath the floorboards for each night they put in, a count that only they understood, ensuring their work remained hidden from prying eyes, a language born of necessity and desperation. Yet freedom felt dangerously close, and the fires of rebellion ignited in Clara's chest. Each day as they labored under the sun, her view of their escape widened. They wouldn't merely flee. They would dismantle the very system of torment that had enslaved so many for so long. With Karen at her side, they envisioned not just their own freedom, but a revolution, a blaze of vengeance that would scorch the roots of oppression rooted deep within Bogard's estate. The days stretched as their hidden tunnel neared completion, but the more progress they made, the more isolated they became within their plans. Clara felt Karen's energy spark more intensely, whereas her own wavered under the weight of not only their shared trauma, but the growing realization of what lay ahead. As Clara rested her back against the cool earthen wall they had carved out, she looked to her sister's fire-filled eyes for reassurance. "What if it doesn't work?" she finally said, a whisper of vulnerability threading through her confidence. "What if they catch us?" Karen's fierce gaze softened for a moment and she promised, "They won't. Not if we're prepared." Together they solidified their strategies. If the overseers caught wind of their plot, they would need something up their sleeve, a trick that would allow them to fight back. Clara ventured to rustle hints of rebellion among the dormitory women, crafting alliances in hushed tones. "If we rise together, we have strength," she would remind them quietly, solidifying bonds with others who had endured too much for too long. The darkness no longer felt lonely. It became their sanctuary, a canvas upon which they drew their dreams of freedom. The night of their escape came under a cloak of stars stretched across the velvet sky, mirroring the countless dreams turned to ash on Bogard's estate. As they crawled into the narrow opening of their tunnel, hearts pounding in synchrony, an uncharacteristic silence enveloped them. Lauren and Clara, two halves of a whole, moved like reflections, driven forward by a single thought rallying them: freedom. Each inch brought them closer to the end of their captivity and the beginning of a new existence. The scent of fresh earth mingled with the anticipation of liberation, spurring them on. "Faster," Karen urged, her voice a fierce whisper in the dark. "If we can make it past the fields, we'll be that much closer." Clara felt the ache of labor and fear, but there was another feeling rising within her: resolve. The world above was unkind, filled with men who viewed them as property. But below, within the shadows, lay the promise of a life unchained. At last, they could sense the cool air welcoming them back to the surface, beckoning them to the life they had once held. But as they clawed the last remnants of dirt from their bodies, laughter and voices carried through the air, a reminder that dangers always lurked, that freedom was never as simple as escaping walls. It demanded courage, a burning heart, and a unity built through shared struggles. Their lives depended on their willingness to reclaim them, and at that moment, freedom felt like a knife in the dark, dangerous yet enticing, and they would wield it against all who dared to possess them. And when dawn's light painted the world anew, they would set forth, twin fires burning bright in the face of adversity, ready to expose the lies cloaked beneath the veil of oppression, and write their own stories as they moved forward from the ashes of a life long shackled. The night air was heavy with the anticipation of violence, a scent of smoke and reckoning lingering on the breeze. Clara and Karen stood side by side, hearts pounding in synchronized dread, as the flames flickered and danced beyond the sturdy walls of Bogard Estate. For years, they had endured the horrors that lived behind those walls, but tonight, they were no longer shackled by fear, nor bound by silence. This was their night, a night determined by vengeance and the blazing fire of rebellion burning in their veins. As the last rays of sunlight surrendered to the shadows, Karen slipped the shard of glass from beneath her head wrap, the cool, deadly edge glinting ominously. Clara's stomach knotted with anxiety, but she felt a fierce resolve build inside her. They had spent their lives as commodities to be bought and sold. But now, the desire for revenge ignited a purposeful fire within them. She looked at her sister, their eyes locking in a silent vow. The Bogards would pay for what they had taken from them. The distant shouts of the plantation's overseer echoed, a harbinger of the chaos yet to unfold. They felt the energy shift. An electric hum of fear and fury lit a path through their hearts as they crept closer to the mansion, every step purposeful, yet stealthy. Crow, the overseer, strode through the yard, his whip cracking like thunder in the oppressive quiet, a constant reminder of the power he wielded, a power they were determined to break. Karen's fingers tightened around the shard, her grip a promise wrapped in desperation. They moved like shadows, back pressed against the walls of their former prison, hearts racing as they approached the entrance, the flickering orange glow spilling out from the windows beckoning them into the belly of the beast. Timing is everything, Clara whispered as they neared their target, the night ripe with the prospect of rebellion. She felt a rooted certainty. Tonight would change everything. A sudden crash echoed from the grand hall and the twins exchanged a quick glance, the sense of urgency surging through them. They dashed forward, slipping through the door before it had fully swung shut, a puff of warm air kissing their cheeks as they stepped into the chaos consumed within. The grand room, once filled with laughter and pretense, now swirled with darkness and anxiety. Elegant chandeliers hung awry, their light battling against the thick smoke spiraling up from the flames that licked at devilish speed through the draped fabrics and fragile furniture. Master's voice, once a tone of authority, now faltered over the sound of crackling wood, panic bleeding into his cast of control. "Get out! Save yourselves!" Bogard shouted, his usual calm demeanor shattered. Clara reveled in the sight, the facade of power slipping away as fire engulfed the very symbol of his dominion. The Bogard mansion was crumbling, a testament to the suffering they had inflicted, and now it too would burn. "Now," Karen hissed, seizing Clara's arm, leading her toward the shadows surrounding the entrance. The flames roared like a living creature, hungry for the blood that had stained the foundations far too long. They could feel the heat crescendo pouring through the door, filling the room with warmth that was both inviting and foreboding. Inside, men in fine suits scrambled, guests who had come to praise wealth and power, now merely guests at a funeral for a master undone. Clara and Karen moved like phantoms among them, intent on their purpose. They headed for the large wooden desk at the far end of the room. Ledgers, records of the horrors committed. The names, the profits, the deals made over the blood of their kin. It had to go. It had to burn. Within moments they reached the desk, papers strewn in disarray. Clara's hands flew over the ledgers, gathering them like a ravenous beast. The ink was still fresh. Every name felt like a stab through their hearts. Women who had suffered as they had, children ripped from their mothers. "Take it all," Karen urged, shoving documents into Clara's arms as the sounds of desperation and confusion echoed around them. "We'll end this here." The air filled with shouting and the cacophony of furniture crashing. A fireball erupted, forcing them to shield their faces. "We need to go," Clara screamed, yanking her sister toward the door. But Karen froze, eyes wide. "The master! He—" A roar tore through the night as Bogard emerged, rage fueling his actions as he half staggered toward them, smoke curling around his body like a shroud. His eyes were wild, a mixture of disbelief and fury as he bellowed to his guests. "Stop those girls!" he hissed, reaching blindly for the nearest table to steady himself. In that moment, the chanting whispers of resolve turned into a vehemence that surged up from their very core. Karen's face transformed. Defiance eclipsed fear. "No longer are we your prey," she yelled, raising the shard with a fierce shout. "We will break this cycle of tyranny." As they dashed for the exit, the flames roared behind them, a fire fueled not just by wood and fabric, but by their shared suffering, rising up to claim the master of the estate, who had sought to play God over their lives. The chaotic rush of the evening carried them out into the air again, the acrid scent of smoke blending with the foul scent of fear lingering around them. "Quick, to the stables!" Clara urged, her voice low as they darted outside into the cool night air. "We can still make it out." The cacophony of the blaze, shouts, and frantic bellows swirled around them as they slipped past the consuming flames, now swallowing Bogard's seat of power. The stables stank of sweat and fear, horses whinnying nervously within as they rushed forward. "Faster!" Karen pushed Clara, darting through the flickering shadows, yearning for freedom. They fumbled with the latch on one of the wagon's doors, the adrenaline coursing through their veins as they fought to pull it open. "We can't let him keep his hold, Karen," Clara breathed, adrenaline making them both reckless and unafraid. "We remember, we endure. Not now, not ever again." With the sound of the earth shaking beneath horses' stampeding hooves, they climbed aboard, grabbing reins as they prepared to bolt from their haunted past. The fire lit the night sky above them, the flickering illumination casting their figures against the dark horizon, a final testament to the horrors of bondage they could finally break. As they galloped into the night, the searing flames consumed everything behind them, flesh and bone intertwined. The scream of vengeance echoed into the darkness, a vow of their further determination to burn the chains of their past, leaving no trace of Bogard behind. With each beat of the horses' hooves and the rage coursing through their veins, Clara and Karen thrived upon the instinct to survive, and in that mad rush across the open land, they ignited a fire not easily extinguished. Theirs was a story only just beginning. The night had finally given way to dawn, but the echoes of chaos lingered in the air. Clara and Karen clung together in the small canoe, the currents rocking them gently as ash rained down from the burning remnants of Turner Farm. Behind them, the flames flickered like a hellish sunrise, illuminating the darkened river and casting shadows on the water's surface, ghostly reminders of horrors left behind. As they paddled downstream, the fire screamed the retribution of those who had suffered in silence. "Do you think anyone will come for us?" Clara's voice trembled as she concentrated on the strokes of the paddle, fending off the weariness that threatened to claim her again. "They can try," Karen replied, her eyes flickering to the inferno that consumed their past. "But we'll be ready." There was defiance in her statement, a reflection of the fire she had ignited within herself the night before. They had not only burned the physical records of their suffering, but had set ablaze the very chains that bound them to a life of oppression. As daylight broke, a golden hue spilled over the water, washing out the horrors of yesterday. With each stroke, Clara felt the weight of the past slip further away, replaced by an insistent tug toward the future. But it was not just freedom they paddled toward. It was vengeance, healing, and the reclamation of what they had lost. The darkness of their lives had become too heavy to carry, but still within them was a fierce determination to build something brighter, something that resonated with hope. "Do you remember the stories Mama used to tell us?" Clara asked softly, letting memories wash over her like the gentle waves lapping against their canoe. About the stars and how they guided runaway slaves to safety. "Of course," Karen responded, a light flickering in her eyes. She said they were a map, a guide to the free world. "Maybe that's what we are meant to be, Clara. A map for others who want to escape." Clara nodded, allowing a smile to creep across her lips as they shared in this vision of possibility. "Yes, but we will be more than a map. We will show them the way, not just in dreams but in action. We'll help others find their freedom, just as we have." The sun rose higher, a persistent beacon cutting through the remnants of their past, illuminating the path ahead. As they glided through the lazy currents, they discussed their plans and shared their dreams of using their voices to challenge the oppression that had haunted them for far too long. "We must gather the others," Karen asserted, her resolve firming with every word. "When the news spreads, there will be others like us, others who want to fight back." Once they reached a secluded spot along the riverbank, they pulled the canoe ashore and took a moment to breathe. They were free, But freedom was only the beginning. Now came the fight to protect it. The twins understood that their mission would not just be about escaping, but about claiming their place in a world that had tried to silence them. They would rise from the ashes of their suffering, their voices loud and unforgiving. As they ventured deeper into the thick woods that lined the river, Clara's thoughts turned to her son, Jonas. The name resonated like a drumbeat in her mind, a reminder of the life she had built amid chaos. She felt a surge of protectiveness flooding through her. There would be no more hiding. He was her legacy, a symbol of resilience and defiance. The child born from the cruelties of the Bogards would be raised in a world where freedom was not just a dream, but a reality. They found shelter in an old cabin, hidden from sight and preserved in the heart of sacred ground. Inside, they gathered supplies from the abandoned belongings of previous inhabitants, rustic tools, preserved food, and remnants of memories left behind. This would be their base, where they could make ready for the battles ahead. Then they would connect with their allies. They knew that the Maroons of the bayou had their own networks, groups of escaped slaves banding together to protect one another. As the sun dipped lower, turning the sky into hues of violet and amber, Clara and Karen felt the urgency of their mission pulsing within them. They had survived the fire, and they would not let their past shame their present. Tomorrow, Clara decided, sitting cross-legged on the floor, we will find the Maroon community. We'll share our story, our truth. They need to know what Turner had going on at his farm, how he was continuing the work of Bogard, selling lives for profit while playing at being a savior. Exactly, Karen replied, her mind already racing ahead. We need to warn them to form an alliance. With strength in numbers, we can keep ourselves hidden and safe while we find others who want to join this fight. As night settled around them, Clara arranged their sparse provisions, adding kindling for warmth in the chilling air. The cabin felt different, not an abandoned place but a fortress, a stronghold for their burgeoning revolution. With the moon lighting their faces, they developed a plan, sharing dreams of liberation that wove their destinies together like vines climbing toward the sun. We'll teach the children to know the truth, Clara vowed, her heart swelling with fierce pride. We'll make sure they understand that their beginnings don't dictate their futures. This child, Jonas, he will grow up in a world of possibilities. Promise me, Karen said, an edge to her voice, that when this is over, when we've taken back what is ours, we'll rebuild. We'll create something that honors those who fought before us. A place of safety, yes, but also a beacon of hope. Together, we'll make it a reality, Clara vowed, locking eyes with her sister, the fire of conviction igniting between them anew. In that moment, they felt the weight of their ancestors fueling them, their voices merging into a single determined cry, echoing through the night. As sleep claimed them beneath the protective canopy of trees, dreams of a new tomorrow warmed their spirits. They had emerged from darkness, bearing the scars of their battle, yet primed for more. The blood of their oppressors stained the ground, and as it cooled, a rich tapestry of hope began to form. They would fight, they would protect each other, and they would never allow anyone to silence their voices again. As the sun dawned on another day, Clara and Karen set forth into the unknown, twin hearts beating as one. Two warriors ready to burn the past and pave the way for a future that sang with freedom.